Welcome back to Tales from the Enchanted Forest with your host Fox and Sparrow, although mine is the Sparrow today. We seem to be doing a lot of solo episodes, but that's just because circumstances of life and sickness have just been haunting us in the Enchanted Forest this year. So here's to a better 2025. So it'll just be me today, and I know this episode's just a tiny bit late, but that's because, again, life happens and I got really distracted with work and with my cats. But today I'm really excited to share a story that I've been kind of wanting to do for a while now. I just haven't been able to really place it because it's kind of a romantic story, but also not. And then it's also an explanatory tale about the Milky Way. And I've just been watching a lot of K-dramas recently, so I decided why not do a Korean story. For anyone who actually is interested, I've been watching Queen of Tears. I know that's finished, but usually I wait for my K-dramas to finish before I watch them because I dread the white truck of doom that comes about halfway through the season or halfway through the show. So I usually wait to see if there's going to be a white truck and then I'll watch it. So yeah, I've just been watching that, and I've been reading a lot of June Her. She is a fellow Canadian, and she is, Korean Canadian, and she has written a couple really nice books that I've just been reading back to back. I read The Forest of Stolen Girls, and I made the mistake of reading it at night, although it's not a horror story. The atmosphere is quite dark for that one, hence the title, The Forest of Stolen Girls. And I just finished A Crane Among Wolves. They're both set in Korea. They are modern feeling, so they're not exactly 100%, in the past. A little bit like Bridgerton, where it still feels a little bit modern, with the characters' different type of reactions to things and their actual personalities, but the setting itself is really well written, and I've just been enjoying lots of Korean media. So I decided to do a Korean story for you today. However, just a disclaimer, like for all of our stories that we've covered, this story does not have a single point of origin. You can see the tale of the Cowherd and the Weaver Girl all throughout Asia in different forms and different tale types. For example, in China, these two are the characters in Chinese mythology and Chinese folktales, and I think they were one of the 4 great folktales of the folktale movement in China in the 1920s. So this specific version that I'm telling is obviously a Korean iteration that, someone heard and they translated and they put it in English. So there's lots of discrepancies between the different versions, and I think it's one of those ones that if you've heard a certain version of it, that's the one you grew up with, that's the one you believe to be the true one. All the power to you. We're not having a fight here. I just want to share the story, and this is the version that I like the most. But for reference, I will be putting the Chinese version up as well, and some tidbits about the Japanese festivals and the Korean festivals and how we just celebrate the Cowherd and the Weaver Girl all throughout. So without further ado, here is The Sky Bridge of Birds. No bird is more common in Korea than the magpie. They are numbered by millions. Every day in the year except the 7th day of the 7th month, the air is full of them. On that day, however, they have a standing engagement every year. They are all expected to be away from the streets and houses, for every well-bred magpie is then far up in the sky building a bridge across the river of stars called the Milky Way. With their wings for the cables and their heads to form the floor of the bridge, they make a pathway for lovers on either side of the silver stream. Boys and girls are usually very kind to the magpies, but if a single one be found about the houses, on the roofs, or in the streets on the 7th of August, woe betide it. Every dirty-faced brat throws sticks or stones at the poor creature for not being about its business of bridge building across the starry river. By evening time, the magpies return to their usual places, for they are then supposed to have attended to their tasks and built the bridge. To prove beyond a doubt that the bridge was made and walked over, you only have to look at the bare heads of the magpies at the time. Their feathers have been entirely worn off by the tramping of the crowd of retainers who follow the prince of Starland across the bridge to meet his bride. If it be wet weather on the morning of this day of the weaver maiden and the cattle prince, the raindrops are the tears of joy shed by the lovers at their first meeting. If showers fall in the afternoon, they are the tears of sadness at saying farewell when the prince and princess leave each other. If any thunder is heard, every boy and girl knows that this comes from the rumble of the wagons, which carry the baggage of the prince and princess as they move away, each from the other, homeward. Now this is a story which Korean mothers tell their children of the Bridge of Birds. Long, long ago in the kingdom of the stars, a king reigned who had a lovely daughter. Besides being the most beautiful to behold, she was a skillful weaver. There was no good thing to be done in the palace, but she could do it. She was not only highly accomplished, but of sweet temper and very willing. Being a model of all diligence, she was very greatly beloved of her parents, and her influence over her father was very great. He would do almost anything to please his darling daughter. In due time, a young and very handsome prince who lived in Starland came to her father's court and fell in love with the princess. Her parents consenting, the wedding was celebrated with great splendor. Now that she was a wife and had a home of her own to care for, she became all the more a model of lovely womanhood and an example to all of the maidens of Korea. Besides showing diligence in the care of clothes and food and in setting her servants a good example of thrift, she thought much of their happiness. Her service to her husband was unremitting. Her chief ambition was to make his life one of constant joy, but the prince, instead of following his bride's good example and of appreciating what his beautiful and unselfish bride was doing for his happiness, gave himself up to waste and extravagance. He became lazy. Neglecting his duties, he wasted his own fortune and his wife's dowry. He sold all his oxen and calves to get money only to lose it in gambling. He borrowed many and long ropes of coin from anyone who would lend him the brass and the iron money. Finally, he was so scandalously poor, being on his last string of cash, that he was in danger of being degraded from his rank as prince, and of having his name spoken with contempt. The king of the stars, having seen his son-in-law on the downward way, had more than once threatened to disinherit or banish him, especially after the prince had parted with his cattle. Yet when his daughter, the young wife, interceded and begged pardon for her husband, the king relented, paid his son-in-law's debts, and gave him another chance to do better. When, however, the worthless fellow fell back into his old ways and grew worse and worse, the king resolved to separate the pair one from the other. He banished the prince far, far away, 6 months' distance from the north side of the river of heaven, and exiled the princess a half a year's measure of space from the south side of the starry stream. Although the king in his wrath had hardened his heart even against his own beloved child, and had driven her from court and palace because of her worthless husband, yet, as a single proof of his compassion, he ordained that on one night of the year, on the 7th night of the 7th moon, they might meet for a few hours. The two young people parted and took their sad journey to the edge of the starry heavens. But they loved each other so dearly that as soon as they arrived at the palace of banishment, they turned around to meet each other on August 7th. So when the day came, after 6 months' weary journeying, they had reached the edge of the starry river, and there they stood, catching glimpses and waving their hands, but unable to get closer to each other. There one may see them on the summer's night, shining in opposite sides of the broad stream of stars, loving each other, but unable to cross. Feeling that the great gulf of space could not be spanned, the loving couple burst into tears.